You are lying face down on a cold slab of ice, 5,300 years old, and someone is about to find the marks on your skin. Your body has just been pulled from a melting glacier in the Alps. Your name is unknown, but your tattoos are still there. 57 of them, dark lines etched across your joints, your spine, your ankles. This is not a hypothetical. This is Ötzi the Iceman, discovered in 1991, and his skin is the oldest tattooed human skin ever found. For most of history, tattoos were not decoration. They were medicine, rank, punishment, and memory, all carved directly into the body. Your ancestors did not have ink cartridges or sterile needles. They had soot, ash, bone, and pain. So how did this actually work? And why did it hurt so much? More than you think? Let's start with the evidence. Researchers led by Albert Zink at the European Academy of Bozen studied Ötzi's tattoos using infrared and multispectral imaging. Since many of the marks had faded into his darkened, mummified skin, what they found was strange. The tattoos were not pictures. No animals, no symbols, no names. Just simple lines and crosses, clustered around his lower spine, behind his left knee, on both ankles. Here is the twist. Modern medical scans of Ötzi's body reveal degeneration in exactly those same joints, arthritis in his knees, wear in his lower back. His tattoos line up almost perfectly with his pain. Many researchers now believe these were not fashion statements at all. They may have been an early form of acupuncture, applied to the exact points where his body was breaking down. Think about that for a second. Before anesthesia, before antiseptic, before anyone understood what a nerve ending was, someone looked at another person in pain and reached for a sharp tool dipped in ash and tried to fix it the only way they knew how. So how was it actually done? Not with the needle in the way you're picturing. Ötzi's tattoos were made using a technique called incision tattooing. A toolmaker would cut a fine line directly into the skin, then rub in charcoal or soot, packing the wound with pigment as it healed. There was no outline drawn first, no stencil, just a blade, a steady hand, and a fire pit nearby for the ash. Now travel forward a few thousand years to ancient Egypt. In 1891, archaeologists uncovered the mummified body of a woman named Amunet, a priestess of the goddess Hathor, buried near Thebes around 2000 BCE. Her body was covered in tattoos, dots and dashes across her abdomen, thighs, and chest, arranged in patterns that seemed almost geometric. For decades, historians assumed these markings belonged only to dancers or women of low status. But newer research, including work published by archaeologist Ann Austin at the University of Missouri St. Louis, has pushed back on that idea completely. Austin's team found tattoos on multiple ancient Egyptian mummies, placed specifically on the lower back and hips, right where the pain of pregnancy and childbirth would concentrate. The theory now is that these tattoos functioned as protective symbols, applied during pregnancy itself, meant to guard the body through the most dangerous experience a woman in the ancient world could survive. Childbirth was not safe. It was often fatal, so women were marking their own bodies, with the only protection available to them, a permanent prayer etched under the skin. Let's reconstruct what this would have actually felt like for you. If you were an ancient Egyptian woman receiving this tattoo, you are seated on a low stool, your lower back exposed. A soot-based pigment, mixed with a bit of oil or fat to help it flow, sits in a small clay bowl beside you. The tool is not a needle you would recognize. It is a fine, sharpened point, sometimes bronze, sometimes bone, sometimes even fishbone, according to some archaeological finds. Each puncture is done by hand, one at a time, no machine to speed the process, no way to numb the skin. A single tattoo could take hours. Some took days, spread across multiple sessions, because the human hand can only endure so much before it needs to rest. Now push further east, to the Altai Mountains of Siberia, and the Pazyryk culture, roughly 2,500 years old. In the 1940s, Soviet archaeologist Sergei Rudenko excavated frozen burial mounds and found the preserved body of a man now known as the Pazyryk chief, his arms and torso covered in elaborate tattooed animals, a deer with impossibly long antlers curling across his shoulder, a griffin stretched down his forearm. These were not medical markings, these were status. The more elaborate the tattoo, the higher the rank. And later discoveries of a tattooed Pazyryk woman revealed the same pattern extended to female leaders within the culture as well. Here is where the ancient world starts to look a lot messier than the myth. You have probably heard the claim that tattoos in the ancient world were purely spiritual or purely tribal, some kind of unified sacred tradition across every culture. That is not quite true, and the real history is weirder. In ancient Greece and Rome, tattoos carried the opposite meaning entirely. The Greek word for tattoo, Stigma is where we get the modern word stigma, and that is not a coincidence. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, described how tattoos were used among the Thracians and Scythians as marks of aristocratic status, admired and elaborate. But the Greeks themselves adopted tattooing, mainly as a punishment, marking slaves and criminals with symbols that permanently branded their status to anyone who looked at them. The Romans inherited this practice. Roman soldiers were sometimes tattooed too, but for identification, not decoration, a permanent dog tag in case they tried to desert. So the very same technique, ash pushed under skin with a sharp point, could mean sacred protection in Egypt, elite status in Siberia, and criminal shame in Rome, all happening across roughly the same stretch of centuries. Historians still debate exactly how much these traditions influenced one another versus developing independently, but the contrast alone tells you something important. There was never one single ancient meaning of a tattoo. There were as many meanings as there were cultures holding the needle. Now, here's the part that connects most directly back to you, sitting here today. The word tattoo itself did not enter the English language until 1769, when the British explorer Captain James Cook and the naturalist Joseph Banks sailed to Tahiti and encountered the Polynesian practice of tattoo, a word describing the sound of the tapping tool striking the skin. Polynesian tattooing was, and remains, one of the most sophisticated tattoo traditions in human history, using a comb-like tool tapped with a mallet to drive pigment into the skin in intricate patterns that recorded a person's lineage, achievements, and rank. Readable, almost like a resume written across the body. When Cook's crew returned to England covered in tattoos of their own, curiosity exploded, and the word tattoo slowly became the English tattoo. So the modern tattoo shop you might walk into today, with its buzzing electric needle, invented by Samuel O'Reilly in 1891, sits at the end of a chain that stretches back through Polynesian tapping tools, Roman branding of criminals, Siberian animal totems carved by chiefs, Egyptian protective marks for pregnant women, and a 5,000-year-old man in the Alps, who is simply trying to make his own aching knees hurt a little less. Why does this matter now? Because you probably know someone with a tattoo. Maybe you have one yourself, and the conversation around it still carries an echo of all these old meanings. Status, rebellion, memory, protection, pain turned into permanence. That tension your friends and family might feel about tattoos, that sense that ink on skin means something more than decoration, did not appear out of nowhere. It has been embedded in human skin, quite literally, for over 5,000 years. You started this video lying on a slab of ancient ice, a stranger's marked skin, the only thing left to explain who they were. Look down at your own skin. Now, whether it is marked or bare, you are still living inside the same old question your ancestors were asking, with every needle, every blade, every point of bone dipped in ash. What do you want the story of your body to say, long after you are the only one left to tell it?